All right, welcome everybody. This is our continuation of our Bible study of the book of Matthew. The first week we heard from Father George. He gave us an introduction, and we started with chapters 1, 2, and 3 last time. This session we will cover as best as we can chapters 4, 5, and 6. So hopefully you were able to read ahead, and we'll have a lively discussion. We just want to remind you that this evening, tomorrow, is the feast of the presentation of the Lord Jesus Christ to the temple. And so after our Bible study, we will hear about that feast and about what that feast means to us as Christians living in this world and what it's meant for Christians for the past 2,000 years since that event took place. The Bible study will be led once again by SubDeacon Adam Murphy, and the discussion about the feast this evening will be led by Chris Holwey. So let's stand, please, and we will begin with the Lord's Prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, now and ever, and unto ages of ages. Amen. God bless you, and enjoy the Bible study. Thank you, Father.
Now, I'm glad that Father Jim led with the Lord's Prayer, because we're actually going to come to that in a little bit here. But tonight we're going to be following our discussion from a couple weeks ago. We're going to go from Matthew 4 through Matthew 6. And does anybody need a Bible?
I can grab some.
Okay, if anybody needs a Bible, Sonia can get you one. So it's going to be a mix tonight of more discussion and then sprinkled in some church father quotes. There's some from some Western church fathers and some Eastern church fathers alike, and most of them, all of them, before the schism. And so a common ancestry and a common kind of mindset, or ethos of reading the scripture, and a interpretation based off of a mix of Judaic as well as Greek philosophical ways of thinking and interpreting scripture. And that's what our tradition really comes out of, is this kind of melding of East and West. Because a lot of people will say that the ancient Greek philosophical ways of thinking were Western, but a lot of modern scholars will actually say that the ancient Greeks and the philosophical schools through the Hellenistic period, carrying through the Roman and Byzantine period, were actually Eastern. And they were Eastern ways of thinking as opposed to Western kind of Germanic and Latin ways of thinking. But even the Latins were influenced by the Eastern way of thinking. If you look at those earlier Western church fathers, it's different than if you look at like Thomas Aquinas, for instance, who is very Western and dogmatic and very rigorous and trying to outline everything. And so in Matthew 4:1, we see that Jesus was driven into the desert. It was led up by the Spirit into the desert, into the wilderness, and he was tempted by the devil for 40 days. And so why is this whole kind of passage important for us? Especially we're in the period that is slowly cranking up toward Great Lent. We're slowly starting to feel it, and it's coming up, and I know a lot of my friends especially are getting in all the meat and cheese that they can, and in anticipation going to all the all-you-can-eat buffets and ordering in food and all this kind of stuff. And we used to do that a lot when I was in high school, go to the Chinese buffet and gorge ourselves on meat. But Jesus shows us that we should expect temptations because even the God-man was faced with temptations from the devil. Right? And so that's really curious that the devil even tried to tempt Christ after he was baptized by John in the Jordan, and the voice of the Father said, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." And the Holy Spirit came down in the form of a dove. The devil saw that. The devil heard that. I mean, he's not stupid. And so even the devil tried to deceive and lead astray God. And we see that I saw him fall from the sky like lightning, talking about Lucifer, right? And we have those Old Testamental things, and it's reiterated in the New Testament, and about the great deceiver, and about the story of Adam and Eve. And so in this first section of chapter 4, we see that the first temptation was with food. And if turn these stones into bread, not just a stone, right? Because a person can be satisfied with a loaf of bread and can get, nourished calorie-wise and everything like that. But it wasn't just a stone, it was stones. So leading through, like when I go to the grocery store and I'm hungry, I know all of us do this. We buy way more things than we need to. It's because we're hungry. So if you're fasting for many days and you're super hungry because Jesus was fully God and fully man, and he felt the hunger, he could have created any food that he wanted, right? He could have turned the stones into bread. And so it was leading not just to a succumbing to the hunger and to the deception from the devil, but it was leading into gluttony, right? Which is, as the Westerners would say, one of the 7 deadly sins. And so if we can control our appetite in our stomach first, then we can control gluttony, we can control vainglory, we can control all these other passions by this virtue of fasting. And that's why the church so beautifully lays out for us, maps out these fasting periods that we have, because the church has seen this. The church has had saints and prophets in the Old Testament that fasted, right? Elijah fasted, and we see Christ now fasting. John the Baptist went into the wilderness and fasted. He only ate locusts and honeycomb. And so we have the church in her wisdom that God revealed to her, gives us these beautiful seasons of fasting by which we can learn then to control our stomachs, and then from there climb up the ladder of divine ascent, like St. John Climacus talks about, to conquer the other passions that we have. Yes?
He was at 40 days.
Yep.
Is that why we have 40 days of fasting?
That is one reason, yes.
So you did think about it.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, we have 40 days plus.
Oh, that's right.
Plus Holy Week, plus cheese fair, plus meat fair, so not just 40 days. But he was fasting completely, right? So in 4:2, we see that when facing temptations or hardships, we should fast. And it says afterward he was hungry, right? Of course he was hungry, because he was man. And then we move to 4:3, and I spoke about, St. Gregory the Dialogist speaks about the forbidden fruit that Adam and Eve partook of, and Christ could also partake of a forbidden fruit, which was that he could have been tempted to change the stones into bread. And so that was, but he turned away from the deception of the evil one and became the new Adam, like Adam was supposed to be in paradise, Adam and Eve, obeying the commandments of God, being in union with God, being in harmony with all of creation, being subordinate, knowing one's place as creation, rather than saying, I'm going to be God, I'm going to be my own God, and I'm going to do as I please. Nowadays, we see everybody saying, live your truth. That's the big thing now. Live your truth. Which I think is really silly. It's like, at most, I can live 105 years or something like that, right? What truth do I know as somebody who's born and only has my contextual experience? What is my truth? Why read literature? Why have this book? Why have truths that have been passed down? Or do we just reject those things because we're smarter than them? We're wiser than them? That is the exact thing that the devil deceived Adam and Eve with, is live your truth, right? You can be more powerful than God. You can be just like God, right? If you take this apple. But Christ in this passage shows us that we can turn away from that deception. And the thing also, when he talks about going up to, one of the other deceptions, go up to the pinnacle of the temple, throw yourself down. I'll give you all of these nations that you look out to. When he took him to the edge of the mountain, the devil was trying to take what was not his and offer it to God. And that goes back again to the whole story of Adam and Eve and the whole story throughout the whole Old Testament. We see that when we have displaced pleasures, when we have displaced focuses for our lives, that we're trying to take what's not ours and turn it and become our own gods of it, but then those things really end up controlling us. Right? You have to worship something. We're liturgical creatures. We're not just Homo sapiens. I mean, in science terms we are, but I forget what theologian I heard say it, but we're Homo adoranis. We're we're worshiping creatures. Right? We're meant to worship something. And so later, I think it's in chapter 5, I have the note for it, but it's you can't serve God and mammon, right? God and wealth, because the wealth will end up ruling you. And I mean, you look through all those books like the Lord of the Rings, one ring to rule them all. And you have all of this whole epic, right? You see all these, Homer's Odyssey, you see all of these great epics through the time, throughout the ages. And they were really talking about like all these things that control us, like the sirens, right? They sang beautiful songs, but they ultimately led to this destruction of the crew when they were going through the strait in Homer's Odyssey. And so what is it that we are meant to do? We're meant to fast. We're meant to, in our liturgical life, in our worshiping life, redirect what the focus of our love is. And all the other loves with lowercase l's can follow behind that in order of largest to smallest, but should be a straight line up to the divine. And so then that should also be the way that we pray, is then the greatest things to the smallest things. And so one curious thing, I mean, are there any comments on that about love, about what the things we worship are, or things in our culture that we see that might, Christ might speak to in this passage, or about the Lenten season? Michael, you had your hand up.
Well, I was going to ask the question about, we know Christ had two natures, and I imagine the devil was kind of just human side to God, because God himself can't be tempted. But that, I guess this was a trial to see if he would, go against his own will, or he would split himself or something like that, and not be of one accord.
Mm.
My Father and I are one.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine this is just his willingness to show us how to be able to stand the wills of the devil. I'm just thinking that this is, how can, how can even, this is a human, his human nature is being tested. And at each time, he says, "Get thee behind me, Satan."
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I think this is an amazing part of the scriptures, is watching how Christ basically comes at the devil with scripture each time. He says, "Live by the word of God, not by bread alone, but by the word of God." So he knows the will of God, he knows the Bible, he knows how to be, and he shows us, I think, how to be able to at least fight temptation.
Mm-hmm.
I know I succumb to it. Everybody does, but I think that's a great part about these passages, is how it gives us the tools, for examples, to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, starting with fasting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that we see is humility, right? Humility to be in one accord, that the Holy Trinity is always in oneness with each person, like always working as one, even though they're three persons, right? In this humility, in this love, this perfection. And that's the thing that the devil doesn't have, is humility. And he doesn't learn his lesson, right? Because when we read the sermon of St. John Chrysostom at Pascha, it says Hades was embittered, but it also, that a translation of embittered is vexed or confused. If Satan wasn't confused by this, he's not going to be confused by anything, and he's not going to be humble enough to know his place, ever. And so when Christ died and went down into the depths of hell and smashed the gates, right, coming out and being resurrected from the dead, Satan was still confused. He just didn't get it, and he still doesn't get it, right? That the second coming, that Christ will come back in glory to judge the living and the dead, the righteous and the sinner, and that Hades won't be able to, like Satan won't be able to grasp it, even then. And that's the thing, is that it's the humility. It's that Satan, in his lack of humility, took the other fallen angel, the angels, and then they became fallen, right? And they became demons, and all that invisible world that's always fighting around us is because there's no love. There's no humility. And so that always confused me, is that Satan always had these opportunities to learn, but he just doesn't. And how are we, as humans, able to grasp something that an angel can't? Even though the angels can see visible and invisible, and can see divine things even more than we can, because we can't see these things, how is it that we, as humans, are able to understand what love and humility are? And that's really what the seed of God in the heart is that we're able to understand these things, what love is. We're able to participate in that, right? Through the sacraments, obviously, but also through our interactions with one another. And that's why war happens, is because we're not able to humble ourselves or to love enough. It's the ego, right? And that's what Satan tries to tempt us with, is this egotism. So I think any conflict that you see, any division you see, is diabolical. And so Christ at 4:11, right before it transitions to the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 5, he commands the angels come and tend to him, which is confusing, right? Because why would God need angels to attend to him or to serve him, right? God can do anything. But this really shows us the two distinct natures in one person, fully God and fully man, but also that the angels who are above us really, that Jesus has the power to command the angels to serve him. So he is God, right? Because no one that's not God can't really command angels to do their bidding, just like this. So then we transition, and Jesus comes back, and he's around all these people, and he heals the sick, and he comes in really into his public ministry after the fasting period and all that. And but then he moves to what might be one of the most well-known scriptural New Testament passages, the Sermon on the Mount. A lot of people quote it all the time. It's a nice kind of thing. But we see the mount or mountains or things like that in the Bible as kind of a sign of, we see it at the Transfiguration, right? And so about glory, about standing, about authority, about these different kind of things. So Sermon on the Mount, Christ kind of puts himself a little bit above so that he can preach to people. But also, is it in, Chris, is it in Luke where it's the Sermon on the Plain? Yeah. In Luke, it's the Sermon on the Plain, so it's not the Sermon on the Mount. So a lot of people say this is the same story, it's just one's at a mount, one's at a plain, but I think it's more about the significance about geography, about stature, about showing that after his time in the wilderness, he comes and he's on a mount preaching to the people. And he removes himself from the hustle and bustle of the city where he healed people, and he removes himself and teaches. And it says he opened his mouth to teach. So many of the church fathers stopped at that. I think in just the one concordance with church father kind of things linked up, the quote passages, there was like 25 things just on he opened his mouth to teach. And so many of them across the board said, that means that he didn't even have to open his mouth to teach. But then when he did, this is really important, because in the Old Testament, when somebody opens their mouth to speak, that means that something really prolific is going to happen, and that you should pay attention to what's about to happen. And so I think that that's a really important thing, that if you have time to look back on, to do a quick Google search of that. Also about breath, about life, about meanings from that words have, and about how your spirit can come out through words, and why we need to be really careful about what words we use, because they have great meaning. And I think that that's another thing that in our culture we kind of dismiss, and people just use whatever language they want. But I think this, and biblically, it shows that words have important meaning. And obviously there's ruh in both Arabic and Hebrew and Semitic languages, about spirit, about breath, about the throat, about, in Hebrew it's the same kind of root for the life, spirit, and breath. So when those movements happen, when the mouth is open. But I think that all of these things, we've heard them time and time again. Where is it? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This is 5:3 if you're looking. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they shall revile you and persecute you, and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And so we know this. We've read it, hundreds of times. We've heard it a lot of times. But poor in spirit, it's about humility before God. And that the church fathers that I read kind of were unanimous about that, about choosing to be humble before God and knowing one's place. And that that way the kingdom is open to them, because they're not trying to supersede or go around and not take the narrow way. Mourn, for they should be comforted. A lot of the church fathers were saying that this is about repentance and about knowing one's frailty and weakness before God and your human condition. Meekness. I think oftentimes we get this word confused with weakness, but meekness is not about being weak. It's about knowing how to control one's power and use it correctly. And that caught me when I saw that, and I heard this during grad school too, but it's not by power or control that you inherit things or that you take things. It's by being the least of all and serving others with the gifts and talents that you have, and using those with power, but to serve. And so I think that that's a really important thing to digest, because we always see these powerful people controlling industry, controlling the world, moving things, conquering nations, displacing peoples, and we can get really angry about that. But what are we called to do as Christians, who are not called to claim any one worldly nation, or we're called to be the people, the family of God? It's by using meekness, transforming our sorrows, our joys, our power, our strengths for the service of the kingdom. And so then we move on, and disciples in the world, you are the salt of the earth. Michael, what is salt? Seasoning, okay. Sonia, what is salt? Mineral. A mineral, okay. Preserve, okay, yeah. Great, so we're on to something. Keeps things together, okay. Mike?
Salt is what we're made of.
Salt is what we're made of, okay.
Humans needed to live, even though
Need to live.
you're not supposed to eat too much of it, but you
Right. That's one thing, in our Western culture, we're like, oh, you should watch your sodium intake, right? But yes, because our food is packed with salt, but also humans need water and salt, right, to live. If you're in the desert, you need to make sure that you have the electrolytes to balance out the water, or else you're going to drown yourself internally, and your cells won't be able to do what they need to do, the proper processes. But also about the seasoning and about the preservation. So these are multiple layers about what Christ is saying. You are the salt of the earth. If it's lost its flavor, you trample upon it. You just throw it away. So to preserve, we're called to preserve the word of God and what God revealed to Abraham and the prophets afterwards, right? that we are the people of God, that God is the Lord and has revealed himself to us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. We're called to be seasoning. We're called to draw out what is good from all people and from the world and from the creation that God's given us. We're not people that, Gnostics, that throw away things in the world or say that they're dirty or that this body is a thing that's meant to be, that's just entrapping our soul. We believe that there's beauty, that God has given us beautiful things to magnify his glory and also our love for him and his love for us. And so to season the world with beauty. Dostoevsky said, beauty will save the world, right? And so if we are seasoning the world, then we're drawing out that beauty from everyone and those talents and gifts that everybody has. And then the last thing was preservation. Wait, we said preservation, seasoning, and the life, right? And so those three things are kind of the three things that the church fathers and that our tradition talks about being the salt. And it's kind of along the same lines that if we're lukewarm, we're going to be spit out, right? It's the same kind of thing like if you have lost your seasoning, you'll be trampled, you'll be thrown to the ground. You are the light of the world. It's the same kind of thing. You don't hide the light under a bushel. No, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. If you've gone to summer camp or anything like that, you know that song. And so, but how do we, it's like money is disposable, right? You can get rid of it. But just like on Pascha, on Saturday night, when the priest comes out with the candle, come receive the light that is never overtaken by the night and glorify Christ who is risen from the dead, right? Comes out from the tomb, the altar at that instant signifies Christ coming out from the grave. And just like here, lights that are shared cannot be extinguished. You can only share your light, right? No matter how much you try to put Christ under something, Christ isn't going to be contained. He's going to find some way to crack through. So if we are like candles, and Christ is the Son of righteousness like we talked about last time, then that light is going to be, we can share it with the rest of the world, with the rest of the cosmos, with things seen and unseen. And so I think that that is a very important thing to know, that even in these times when we're in this culture that's so confusing, when we're in a world that everybody has their own truth, everybody has their own opinion, everybody has their own thing, and it might just seem so hopeless, like we're a small minority, and that Christianity is becoming less and less visible in the culture. Like, I went to a party when I was in college, and we ended up talking about the Bible. Because what kind of kid of mine to bring up the Bible at a college party? But a kid didn't know about the story of the prodigal son. And I'm like, this is one of the most literary shared, stories throughout every major author on the face of the planet after the New Testament was written has a kind of prodigal son story that exists woven in because it's just so ingrained in the culture. This kid who was a white American kid who you would think would have some kind of understanding of what prodigal son, because it's in music, it's in lyrics, and didn't know what the story of the prodigal son was. And so what kind of hope is there if we lose these kind of stories and these kind of myths in the broad sense of what a myth is, a story that runs throughout culture to teach us something. But you are the light of the world. And if we're living our lives in accordance with God's will and being the salt and being that light, then all we can do is share that light with others. And so every time we leave church and we go out to brunch, it's that small little thing you can do. The liturgy after the liturgy. Tip your waitress a little more. Love the cashier. Say some nice words. Even if you're in a rush to get somewhere and you're held up by someone, you don't know what's going on. That kindness and that love that Christ showed us, that humility, is then that light that we can share with others. That little candle that can be shared, just like on Pascha. And so then we move on to throughout 5, and there's all these kind of Levitical law things that Christ reiterates about. You shall not murder, but then he goes to the next extreme. If you look at a woman lustfully, right, you're committing adultery in your heart. That caught people off guard, right? That's different. So it's called a bigger call. To whom much is given, much is expected. Right? And so no, Christ, the God-man, has come. It's next level stuff. And we're going to move to 6 because I want to make sure that we have time to hear about the feast day that's coming tomorrow. So now, also with Lent coming up, the church fathers tell us that this is a time to be conscious of giving alms to the poor. Many of us think, Thanksgiving, Christmas, I'm going to give something extra. Yeah, of course. I mean, you should. And we have the example of St. Nicholas and of Christ, obviously, and the gold, frankincense, and myrrh that the wise men gave, and it's cute and it's nice. But during Lent, when we fast from food, oftentimes it can seem more expensive to fast because we're getting shrimp, we can get lobster, we can get all these things that are fasting foods that are delicious. But if we fast truly, then we're taking more of what we have and giving it to the poor. Almsgiving. And then how to pray. It's like we have the Sunday of the publican and the Pharisee, right? And that's one of the major days in the life of the church, is about, again, humility, about softening the heart, about being in obedience to God, not in a showy, flashy way, but I just saw a story from, many of you might know my friend Steve Christoforou, the Be the Bee guy on YouTube. He posted that he used to go to the monasteries a lot, and he had a really long prayer rope. And when he wasn't praying with it outward and it wasn't worn, he was from New York City, and so he would be praying with it on the metro, all that kind of stuff, and he would go to the services and pray with it. And one of the abbot of the monastery called him aside and said, "Can I ask what you're doing with that?" "Oh, I'm praying with it, making sure, and when I'm not, I wrap it around my wrist." And he said, "Put it in your pocket." And I found that to be really striking because on his platform, he has thousands and thousands and thousands of people that watch his videos and that read his Instagram posts and his Facebook posts and stuff like that. He was able to share a story about how prayer should be done internally and not for our own glory, and we shouldn't be praying to ourselves and gazing at our navel all day, trying to seek something inside ourselves necessarily, I mean, when we're at a different level in our spiritual lives, yeah, that can happen, right? You can know the inward parts of your heart and see God there. But when we're doing it as a public display, then it's this kind of misdirected piety. And Christ points that out. The God-man points that out. And he says, go into your closet and pray. And then he teaches us how to pray. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And so we have this beautiful prayer that Christ himself gave us and that we say all the time, or that we should be saying all the time. And then how to fast. Moreover, this is 6:16. Moreover, when you fast, do not be like the hypocrites, with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear to men to be fasting. Assuredly I say to you, they have their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. And then, moving on, again, I have to speed this up for sake of our time, because we can speak a lot to that. But in this last section of 6, this speaks to me every time I read it, because I like to plan, and I like to think about the future, and I like to think of my life exactly how it's going to go, and my life has not gone how I expected it to be. I would not be here if my life was how I expected it to be. I would not have ever dreamed myself in the basement of St. Mary Basilica in Livonia, Michigan, because I'm not from the Midwest. I'm sure many of you who immigrated here did not think your life would end up in Livonia, Michigan either. So Christ himself, who knows all things, even before time, because God is outside, before eternal, we can't even fathom what those words or that concept even is, tells us just focus on today. Just focus on this present moment. And that's really striking, because the one who is and knows all things before, during, and after is telling us, just focus on now, because now is what matters. And I think that speaks back to the salt of the earth and the light of the world, because if we try to control what we are or what we're doing or where we will be, then we're not focusing on what's most important, which is God and our neighbor, the neighbor right in front of me, and how I can be the salt and the light of the world right now, as I am, how I'm feeling, what's going on, how I can embrace that right now. And make that beautiful, and season it, and preserve it, and shine God's love and grace through humility to my neighbor who's right in front of me. And really look that person in the eye and let them know that God loves them and that they're beautiful and they're the most important thing in the world, and that this is the most beautiful moment that ever exists. And when we do that, no trauma, no wave can push us aside, can throw us down. And I think that's why Christ gives us this beautiful, beautiful thing about the birds of the air. They don't worry about tomorrow. They're just doing all their thing. Let God deal with what God deals with, and let us deal with what we can. And that brings us to the end of 6, and the end of the 3 chapters that we're going to be covering. And if anybody has any questions, I mean, this is open discussion time. I don't know. 7:51, so we have to wrap up in like 2 minutes. We got 2 minutes for open Q&A or thoughts on these three. I mean, they're huge chapters, so.
If anyone does have anything to say, if you'd please just speak up, because we do have people listening from other places, so just speak up so that we can all hear the discussion.
I noticed in 6 that you actually finish here in chapter 6 in verse 24. It says, "No one can serve two masters,
Mhm.
for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon."
Mhm.
That's what you started with,
Mhm.
as far as, all the temptations, to be able to switch and turn ourselves and look towards God. It's like in love. It's like, this is like the perfect, 3 chapters to explain how we're supposed to live, written, spoken by God himself to us.
Mhm.
That's, be one with God.
Mhm.
It's an incredible 3 chapters.
Mhm.
Incredible.
Yeah. And it's not like planning things is not good, right? We should have some kind of plan to guide us, right? Savings, healthcare, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we shouldn't just reject everything and get rid of everything we have and no. I mean, there have been cults that have done that and Christian movements that just like expected the end times right now and sold everything, got rid of everything, quit their jobs, and that end time didn't come. So some level of planning is good, but it should serve the ultimate. It should serve that love. With wisdom, right, and prudence. Yeah. Yeah.
So, concerning like the 40 days of fasting, what's the parallel between that and the 40 days that the Israelites spent in
Mm-hmm.
Sinai?
It's 40 years, yeah.
40 years, so.
Yeah. So I mean 40 has kind of always has been a number that's existed throughout the scriptures. And I mean there are people way more wise than I that could speak, and you could Google search what the church fathers say about it. But I think that yeah, Lenten series. But that Christ, he could have turned the stones into anything he wanted. But when God gave the manna to the Israelites in the desert, it fed them with a kind of with a godly, a mystical nutrition, right? It satisfied them beyond all satisfaction. It tasted like what they wanted it to taste like. It was a godly food, right? And so God did not let them down, but they still then made the golden calf, right? They still worshiped the golden calf. Then Moses had to go up to the mountain to get the 10 Commandments, get the law. And he came down and he saw what this was happening. He smashed the tablets, right? And then he had to go up again and get tablets. And so in the same way, Christ goes out to the desert. If you go to Palestine and go to the Mount of Temptation and you look out, you can see the whole valley and all the thing right in front of you, and it's really hot there. It's really unpleasant, but it draws a parallel that Jesus forsook that heavenly kind of manna for the sake of fasting and preparing for the next things that were to come in his earthly ministry. And the Israelites, even though they were fed with manna from heaven, they still were not humble, and they were getting bored, and they then built a golden calf because they didn't trust God. And so there's it's trust and humility, right, drawing that kind of parallel. So.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for coming. And tonight we're going to talk about the presentation of the Lord in the temple, the feast that is here tonight and tomorrow. Before I do, I would like to say just 2 things about previous topics. Last time, 2 weeks ago, we talked about the date of Pascha, and I said that it comes, the the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox. And someone said, doesn't it always have to wait till after the Jewish Passover? And I said, well, not necessarily, but it always happens that way anyway. Well, in a sense, that's right, and in a sense, that's wrong. To correct it, there is a canon in the church that we have. It's from the apostolic canons, canon number 7, and it comes from the 4th century. It was even before the first ecumenical council. And even though they did talk about it at the first ecumenical council, they never had any formal announcements about it because it was already done before, and they simply wanted to make sure that it was going to hold. So what that canon actually said, the apostolic canon, was, if any bishop, presbyter, or deacon shall celebrate the holy day of Easter, Pascha, before the vernal equinox, with the Jews, let him be deposed. So there is a canon in the church that references the fact that we should not celebrate with the Jews. So there it is. It's not that it doesn't have anything to do with it, but it says that we shouldn't do it with them. Now, I said that it always happens after the fact, after Passover anyway. And why is that? Because through the centuries, the Jews had changed their dates and how they calculate Passover. And it became to be before the vernal equinox, before the first day of spring, and we always wait after the vernal equinox. Like I said, after April 3rd on the old calendar, which is March 21st. So I just wanted to correct that. It doesn't directly, but it is indirectly. We wait because they've changed, and they're before the spring, and we're after spring. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention, excuse me, was just to show you how Scripture works. In one sense, this last week, well, in December 20th, we celebrate the feast of St. Ignatius. Okay? We all know St. Ignatius. And it struck me that in the month of January, there are many, many church fathers that we celebrate. And St. Ignatius is another one of them. He's celebrated on January 29th when they translated his relics. And I tried to find out where. I think it was May. I don't know this. I don't know. This is only what I'm thinking. That he died. He died on December 20th, and maybe it took another month for them to actually get his relics and transfer them to Antioch. I don't know that. But it just says, all it does say in the accounts is that it was a translation of his relics. Anyway, on January 29th as well as December 20th, we read the Gospel, St. Mark, chapter 9. Now, you might think it's a little odd as to what is about Mark chapter 9. Well, it reads this. Then Jesus came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, what is it you were talking about, disputing yourselves on the road? Because the disciples were following him, and they were talking about certain things, and they were kind of embarrassed because they kept silent, and they said, because they were talking about who would be the greatest. And so Jesus kind of probably knew that, and he says, what are you guys talking about on the road over there? And so he sat down and he called them all together, and he said, look, if anyone desires to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all. Well, that in itself, St. Ignatius served many people. And so the scripture always relates to something that was happening with that particular saint or that particular feast that we celebrated, like today. But then it says, then he took a little child and set him in the midst of them. And when he had taken him in his arms, he said to them, whoever receives one of these little children in my name receives me. And whoever receives me receives not me, but him who sent me. Now, why do you think the church put Mark 9 and that particular gospel reading for St. Ignatius on both times we celebrate St. Ignatius?
Well, I heard that St. Ignatius, he was called he was the baby and child in Christ's arms.
He was that child. That's what our tradition is, right? That's what our Orthodox tradition is, that when Jesus took that child and said, whoever receives one of these children, in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. We believe, through tradition, Nothing's written like that, but it's through oral tradition that that child was St. Ignatius. So just to show you, when you have a saint being celebrated, and you look at their epistle and their gospel, or a feast day like today, it's going to point towards something about those saints, that happening, the feast, whatever is being celebrated. So I just wanted to share that with you. All right, permit me to go through this service, this feast with you now. And there are three things that I'd like to point out about this feast, and then the last one, the fourth one, is going to be a summary about everything. I found this really fascinating. I never knew this before. I learned that from listening to Father Hopko through the years. Okay. Jesus was a perfect human being. And so one of the things that we know about what he did was that he followed the law. Because no one could follow the law. But he did. And every time something was going to happen, he basically allowed it and wanted it to happen because he had to fulfill all righteousness. So he was born on Christmas Day on December 12th, which is now December 25th. He comes into the world as a babe. He follows the law. 8 days later, he is circumcised. He's brought to the temple. He's circumcised in following the law. And he's named. They're given a name, Jesus, to him. And then his mother Mary has to wait another 40 days before he's presented into the temple. And this is according, as we heard tonight in Vespers, according to the law, which was really quite interesting when you listen to all of that and what was said, because it really points to how he had to fulfill everything. And not only him, but his mother. She had to come to the temple after 40 days and present him to the temple. And then in the reading today from the Exodus, and it's not strictly one thing right after another through Exodus, it's starting here, a couple verses here, and a couple verses there, and more over here. It's kind of skips and jumps. But it's a composite of a reading from Exodus. So, Michael, you talk about 40 days. 40 in the Bible was always a sign of something very complete. It was a completed time period. That's what 40 usually represented. Jesus was in the desert fasting 40 days. The Israelites were in the wilderness 40 years. It was more of a completed time period. And the law said you wait 40 days after your child is born, and then you present him to the temple. Jesus was on the earth 40 days after his resurrection, and then he had the ascension. So the 40 is more of a sign of significance, that it's a completed time period, and now you can move on. What do we do after someone dies? We have the memorial 40 days after. Yes, there's a 9-day and then the 40-day and then the 6 month and a year, but it's 40 days. That's the traditional, typical one we follow. So on 40 days, Mary and Joseph bring Jesus to the temple, okay? Now, what we read about this is that, okay, first thing I want to talk about this feast. In presenting Jesus to the temple 40 days, first of all, it was to complete and fulfill the law of Moses. Okay, that's what I'm saying. So if you look at this whole time frame, you started back on November 15th, actually, with the fast, the Nativity fast. You go through all that time, the 40 days of the fast, okay? Christmas, it is 40 days. Then he's born. He comes into the world, the Son of God becomes the Son of Man. Then he has his 8-day circumcision, and then 40 days later, tomorrow, he's presented to the temple as a completion of that event, as a completion of his coming into the world. The Son of God becomes the Son of Man. He presents himself. God comes to be with us. Emmanuel, God with us. And now, in order for him to complete that in the fulfilling of the law, they bring him to the temple. And why they do that is to fulfill the law, because he had to fulfill it. And even when we had the baptism in January 6th, when suddenly, we celebrate, 12 days later after his birth, and now he's an adult, okay. He's baptized, and John the Baptist kept saying, well, no, I don't need to be, I can't baptize you. You need to baptize me. And Jesus said, no, let it be to fulfill all righteousness. It has to be in order to complete it, because he had to complete and fulfill the law. That's what is happening here. He's completing the law. He comes as one of the Trinity. He comes as the Messiah. He comes as the suffering servant. And the first time he actually sheds his blood for us is when he is circumcised. And he comes at 40 days now to present himself, to fulfill himself as the Lamb of God who is being presented. Now, why is it important for this to take place? The firstborn, the first male child that opens the womb, as we heard tonight, the one who opens the womb must be presented to God. Well, we heard it in the Exodus. It's really fascinating. You know, when Israelites were in Egypt and Moses was trying to get them out and Pharaoh wouldn't let them go, and they had one plague after another, and finally the 10th plague was the killing of the firstborn, all males and all firstborn and all of man and beast. Of man and beast. You know, the angel of death came and wiped out the firstborn child and the firstborn of all the animals. Now you say, well, that's kind of cruel. I mean, really? Well, God was true. We can't really question him. He was trying to make a point. And what happened with the Israelites? The angel of death passed over them because they took the blood of the lamb and they put it on their doorposts. And the angel of death saw that blood on the doorposts, which may have even been in the form of a cross on the lintels and across the top and down the side, so it almost looks like a cross. He passed over. And they were spared. Now, why that's important? So Jesus comes as the Lamb of God. Okay? He's being presented now. He comes to shed his blood so that we will pass not just out of Egypt, out of the slavery of Egypt, into the promised land. He takes us from the sins and the bonds of Satan into the kingdom of heaven. And so what we say in our church, if you come in here on a normal Sunday, not when it's a festive season, but in the 8th ode of the canon that we sing on Sundays, it says, one of the lines is, then was the type, now is its fulfillment. Right, Michael? We sing it. Then was the type, now is its fulfillment. That's why. Because it's all being fulfilled in Christ, in the Son of God, in the Messiah, in the Lamb of God, in the suffering servant. He is now come to fulfill it all. So before, you could look at throughout the whole Old, I think we should probably do that. That should be one of our topics, I think, in the future. We're going to have to look at the fulfillment, the types in the Old Testament, and how they're all fulfilled in the New. Because you could go through from Noah and the ark and the dove. That's all sacramental. You could see it all. But for what we're talking about tonight, that's the type, was the Lamb of God being sacrificed, the blood, so the angel of death passes by, and all the other firstborns, the evil, the idolaters, everything that was of idol worship that belonged to Pharaoh and that wasn't, following God's way and rule, all that was wiped out. Now is the fulfillment in Christ through his blood, through his sacrifice, that we pass from death to life. So you can kind of get a nice feel for that. Everything really comes to its conclusion in Christ for what is happening here. From Exodus, we hear it. Oh, and then what's the firstborn? Because he's the firstborn. That doesn't mean there's more. It only means he's the first one that comes. What is the firstborn? What does the firstborn get? Well, he's typically, in the tradition, the heir of it all. He gets everything, he inherits it all from the Father. So St. Paul calls, it's interesting, St. Paul calls Jesus the firstborn of creation because he's now taking on our humanity and now being born and taking all that on. He's now going to be the firstborn of creation who fulfills it all, who follows the law of God, who does the will of God and accomplishes it all for righteousness' sake. St. Paul also calls him the firstborn of the dead. Because now that he died and he goes in to trample on death and to raise the dead, now he comes up and he's alive. He's the firstborn from the dead, the firstborn of creation, the new creation that we have now. He has fulfilled it all. He's completed it all. And if you want to know something, too, that after his death and resurrection, when the Holy Spirit comes on us in Pentecost, I've heard it said that that's actually the end of history. I mean, that was 2,000 years ago. What do you mean there's no more history? Well, sure, we have our history and such. But really, if you think about it, with Christ fulfilling it all, he said it all. He's done it all. He hung on the cross and he said, "It is finished. It's done. It's all been accomplished. There's nothing more to say. There's nothing more to do." And so that's why any other prophets that come after Christ, what are you going to say? How much more could be said? How much more could be done? Is there more blind people to heal? Paralytics to heal? Deaf to hear? Blind to see? Hungry to feed? Any more dead to raise? He's done it all. He's fulfilled it all in righteousness. And so that's what happens on this feast. The 40 days, he is coming to fulfill it all for us and for our salvation. Then we get into the second aspect of the feast that I want to present to you. And so it wasn't only Mary bringing the child Jesus to the temple. She had to come herself to be purified. Okay? And we still have that today. In our church, the Orthodox Church, we have the presentation and the churching, we call it, of the baby. 40 days or around that time after a child is born. So the priest goes to the back of the church and he says some prayers over the child and over the mother to welcome her back. Now I want to correct, and I've said this many times before in my own parishes and such, but I want you to understand that there is a wrong understanding of all of that. That many times in our earlier days, years prior, we always used to think that the woman had to come to be purified and couldn't come to church before that because she was unclean. You know, some kind of a thing with a woman because she was menstruating or because she now had a baby and there was all the blood and everything, and now she had to be purified and cleansed because she was something morally wrong, something sinful, and now she has to come and be cleansed of all of that and purified in order to make her right now to come back to church. No. There's nothing immoral or sinful about conceiving a baby, about bringing a baby into the life, into this world, and all the stuff that has to go through for it to take place. There's nothing sinful about any of that. And that, by the way, is why we do not believe that when we say in the Psalm 50, for behold, I was conceived, well, if you look at your normal Bibles, they all say, for behold, I was conceived in iniquity, and in sin did my mother bear me. No, we don't look at it sinfully like that, no. That was Augustine's teaching for the West. When we look at it, we look at the Septuagint version, and the Greek version of it says, for behold, I was conceived in iniquities, and in sins, plural, did my mother bear me. What does that mean? It means that I was not born or conceived or born into this world in sin. There's nothing sinful about it. When a husband and a wife come together, there's nothing sinful about them conjugating their marriage or creating a child and conceiving and then bearing that child into the world. Nothing sinful. Rather, what it means for us is that we're born in sins, meaning that I am now born into a world in which exists sin and sickness and suffering and ultimately death. So we suffer the consequences of original sin. We don't bear the guilt of original sin. That was Adam and Eve's fault. I have my own sins to confess before God. We all do. And that's what I am guilty for, is my own sins. I'm not guilty for what anybody else does, and you're not guilty for what I do. So we're born into a world that already exists. There's sin and sickness, suffering. That's the world that Adam and Eve gave to us, and now we're born into it. So when Mary conceived, or any woman conceives or bears a child, there's nothing sinful about it. So what does it really mean then? Even though you listen to those prayers got adopted years, centuries ago, and yes, they'll talk about it and say, well, we don't know how they got into it like that, to purify the woman, cleanse her, O Lord. But it really has nothing to do with that physical cleansing. What it has to do with is this, and it's really cool. When you think about it, what is creation? What is creation? What is it to create? To bring something into this world out of nothing. It's a divine act. It's not something humans can just do. I have to tell you, don't let me get off track too much. There's a funny joke about that man and God got together. I have to say this because it's really on the point. Man comes to God and says, I got everything figured out. I know how you create. I can take care of this. And God says, really? You really understand creation? Oh, yeah, I got it handled. I understand it completely now. We've been doing our science and everything. We understand how things are created. And God says, all right, well, let's have a test. He says, we'll all take time, a few minutes here to put things together, and we'll create. And man says, okay, sure, very good. So they start to create. Man reaches down, he grabs the dirt, and he starts to form something. And God says, hey, wait a minute. He goes, why? What's the matter? Get your own dirt. You go create your own dirt. That's my dirt. We don't have creation all figured out. That's why it's a divine act. And so when a woman creates, when a woman bears a child and brings forth a child, that's creation. It's a divine act that God allows us humans to participate in. And when we participate in that, when the woman participates in giving birth, it's in direct contact with God. You are participating in a direct action of God. And so when we come in that direct light of God, in all his uncreated holiness, everything that's beyond what we can ever imagine, and here we are in our creatureliness, our sinfulness, that's where that sin comes in. Just the fact that we are creatures and we are sinful beings, and we're in direct contact with that light, that divinity, that uncreated Godhead and nature. That's what the purification is for. It's to come and offer us a cleansing in that sense, because we have been in contact with the very uncreated nature of God in a divine act. It's not because she's done anything sinful. It's because she has come face to face with God. And so it's sort of like a blessing now to welcome her back from having such an unbelievable experience in that sense. So that's what the purification really is. In all our creatureliness, we stand and are in need of that type of blessing. And there are many people who might say, well, Mary didn't really give birth like in a normal human sense. She was the mother of God. There's a lot of talk about that that's wrong. In the Orthodox understanding, she was a real human being. She conceived, and once that conception took place of the Holy Spirit, that the Son of God was now a real embryo, a real fetus, growing, developing, coming to life, being born, and even growing, and coming to know who he was as he was growing as a child. And there's no what's the word is of a ancient heresy is Docetism. There's no Docetic things here. Docetism means what seems. Oh, it just seemed like the Son of God became a man. It seemed like he was really born. It seemed like he really suffered on the cross and died and rose, but it wasn't real. No, absolutely not. That was from the 2nd century. And the church came together and said, no, that's a false teaching. He was a real human being. He really was born. He really died in the flesh. He suffered on the cross. He gave up his blood, and he rose from the dead. It's real. And that's the reality of it. All right, so then we have the third thing. Oh, another really interesting thing. I love this feast. It's so many good things. All right, so then they're brought to the temple. And who are they met by? Simeon and Anna the prophetess. Simeon. Oh, what can we say about Simeon? Well, that's where we get when he looks at the Christ and he says, he's been waiting how long? Wait till I tell you. How long? And he's old. How old? And he takes the child and he said, Lord, now let thy servant now let me depart in peace. For mine eyes have seen thy salvation. You finally provided us with this Messiah you promised us. And now I can die in peace. Because he is the glory of the people Israel, but he's also the light to the nations, the light of all the Gentiles, and the glory, finally the glory, the Messiah of Israel. So this feast is not only called the presentation of God in the temple because he's being presented, it's called the meeting of the Lord in the temple. And why do we say the meeting? Well, here is where God meets man, in that sense. That God is coming in his humanity. He's the Son of God, so he's one person, but he's two natures, God and man. Now he's being presented in the temple, and Simeon, representing all of us, meets God in the flesh. So that's why it's also called the meeting of the Lord. And this really is the conclusion of this whole Christmas season. And I'll share that with you in just a sec too. So what was I talking about? Simeon? How old was he? Well, very interesting. You ever hear about St. Nikolai Velimirovich? He's a Serbian saint, St. Nikolai. He wrote it's a 2-volume series called The Prologue of Ohrid. Each day is dedicated to talking about the saints of the day, and it gives a little reflection and a homily and a little, like 3 different kinds of talks that he shares about certain things going on either for that day or something that's important for us to know. It's really a wonderful collection. Well, tomorrow, February 2nd, is the feast of the presentation of the temple, of Christ in the temple, the meeting of the Lord. February 3rd, on the day after any feast, major feast that we have, we celebrate whoever was important in that feast. So the day after Christmas, the 26th of December, we celebrate the Synaxis of the Virgin Mary. When January 6th, Jesus is baptized, January 7th is St. John the Baptist. Right. So tomorrow, the feast of the presentation of Christ in the temple. February 3rd, we remember Simeon, St. Simeon and Anna, the prophetess. So when you read in the prologue of Ohrid by St. Nikolai, on February 3rd, it says this: during the reign of the Egyptian emperor Ptolemy Philadelphus in the 3rd century BC, Simeon was chosen as one of the famous 70 to whom was entrusted the task of translating the Bible from the Hebrew into Greek. It's what we know as the Septuagint, right? Simeon was performing his task conscientiously, but in the process of translating the book of the prophet Isaiah, he came upon the prophecy, "Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son." And he became confused. And he took a knife to remove the word virgin because he's thinking, how in the world can a virgin give birth to a son? That must be wrong. That's wrong translation. We're going to have to correct that. Well, at that point, an angel of God appeared to Simeon and restrained him from his intention, explaining to him that the prophecy is true, that it is correctly written, And the messenger of God also said that Simeon would become convinced of it personally. For according to the will of God, he said to you, Simeon, you will not die until you see the Messiah born of the Virgin. And so the righteous Simeon rejoiced to hear such a voice from heaven. He left the prophecy unchanged, and he thanked God who made him worthy to understand that fact, that a virgin shall bear a son and call his name Emmanuel. And so when the young child Jesus was presented in the temple by the Virgin Mary, the Spirit of God revealed this to Simeon, who was very old. Very old? How old was he? Well, the Septuagint was done back in the 3rd century BC, or somewhere maybe around 250 BC. So he had to have at least been that. And so now you're at, almost 0 with Jesus being born. So Simeon probably, maybe was over 300 years old, maybe 350 years old. Then we say, oh, that can't be true. That's what the tradition is. We can believe it. Or, I found it fascinating that it does make sense, don't you think? That he was one of the 70 who was chosen to translate that, and because of that particular verse, and he didn't change it, that now he says, he was told, nope, you're going to believe it because you won't die until you see it come true. And he witnessed it himself. So that's what was written about him. And then Anna the prophetess, of course, she too recognized the Messiah and proclaimed it all to the people, So that was the third thing that I wanted to say about St. Simeon, that he is receiving Jesus at this time. And now he says, Lord, now your servant can depart in peace because mine eyes have seen thy salvation. That's what it's all about. From the time of Christmas to the time of his circumcision, to the time of his baptism, his presentation in the temple, and then to his death and his resurrection, it's all about salvation. He came to save us. And that's what the angel said to the shepherds out in the field. Behold, today is born for you in the city of David, Christ the Son, a child who will be the Savior of his people. And so they go and they see, and that's what Joseph was told too, and Mary was told in both of the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. You shall call his name Jesus because he will save his people from their sins. And you talk about the type and the fulfillment. Then was the type, now is the fulfillment. Well, it was Joshua. Moses didn't take the people into the promised land, by the way, remember? Because he couldn't. He not only disobeyed God at one point, but he also represents the law, and the law cannot get us into the kingdom of heaven, just following the law. Joshua came after Moses and took the people across the Jordan into the promised land, because Joshua is Hebrew for Jesus, Savior, same word, different language. So Joshua, the Savior, takes them all across the Jordan River into the promised land. That was the type. Now is the fulfillment. Jesus takes us for salvation into the kingdom of heaven. And if you look at the liturgy, one more thing. If you look at the liturgy at the entrance hymn, the little entrance when we come out and we bring the gospel book, and then after he says, wisdom, let us attend, and then we sing, on Sundays we sing, come, let us worship and fall down before Christ. Save us, O Son of God, who art risen from the dead. Well, on feast days, there are special psalm verses that come for that. And what is the psalm verse for tomorrow, for the liturgy, at the entrance hymn? The Lord hath made known his salvation. He's made it known. Here he is. That's why he's here. He has revealed his justice, his righteousness in the sight of the Gentiles. So he's come not just to fulfill himself as the Messiah, but for all the nations. And then we sing, save us, O Son of God, who was born in the arms of the righteous Simeon, who sing to thee, Alleluia. All right, last thing. I want to share with you the troparion that we sang earlier tonight. the troparion for this feast. It's really amazing. I'm going to say it first, okay? Rejoice, O Virgin Theotokos, full of grace, for from thee arose the Son of Justice, Christ our God, lighting those who are in darkness. Rejoice and be glad, O righteous elder, carrying in thine arms the deliverer of our souls, who granteth us resurrection. Now, how many feasts throughout the whole year, how many feasts do you think are in that one troparion? How many? 1, 2, 3, 4? Rejoice, O Virgin Theotokos, full of grace. Let's stop right there. What is that? Annunciation. Remember when Gabriel came to Mary and said, Rejoice, O Virgin Theotokos, you have been found worthy to bear the Christ, O full of grace. Rejoice, O Virgin Theotokos, full of grace. So it even started, the troparion for this feast even started back in Annunciation, when he was conceived. For from thee arose the Son of Justice, Christ our God. The Nativity. Christmas. Thy nativity, O Christ our God, hath given rise to the light of knowledge in the world, for they that worship the stars did learn therefrom to worship thee, the Son of Justice, the Son of Righteousness. Right. Then, lighting those who are in darkness. Theophany. Lighting those who are in darkness. What did we hear on January 6th, on the Epiphany? You know, the reading was from Matthew, and it said, Jesus heard that John had been arrested. He withdrew to Galilee. Leaving Nazareth, he went to dwell in Capernaum by the sea in the territory of Zebulun and Naphtali, so that what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. The land of Zebulun, the land of Naphtali toward the sea, across the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. And those who sat in the region and shadow of death, light has dawned. Yes, that's what I said, Matthew. Matthew 4, right. What did I say?
I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Matthew 4. So here you've got Annunciation, you've got Christmas, his birth, Son of Justice, you've got his baptism, the lighting, it's because now he's presented, he's lighting those who are in darkness. He's opening our eyes and our minds, opening our world. Now it says, Rejoice and be glad, O righteous elder, carrying in thine arms the deliverer of our souls, the Redeemer of our souls, the Redeemer, the Savior. He is our Savior. That's what it's all about. And then you conclude it with how is all that then made possible at the very end, the conclusion, the fulfillment of it all, who granteth us resurrection. So actually there's 5. Who granteth us the resurrection. That's it. And so that's why I actually had that note here to say it's finished, it's consummated, everything's done. That's the end of history. You know, because now when he comes and he dies and he rises again, he's ushering in the new kingdom. And that new kingdom is now coming for us. It will be confirmed in a sense on the coming of the Holy Spirit. You know, a lot of times we say that the Pentecost, we say that all the time. Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit comes, it's the birthday of the church. In a sense, but, you know, I wanted to write a paper for this and ask them to put it in the Word one day. If I ever get a chance to read or write it. I don't think it's, and I want to look up the fathers more on that, I don't think it's the birthday of the church. Because you look at when Eve was created, she came from the side of Adam. That was her day. She came from the side of Adam. And what do we say that how the church was born from Christ? From his side. When he was on the cross and they pierced his side and blood and water came out. To me, that seems like that's the beginning. That's the birth of the church. He's dying for the sake of his bride, the church. She's being born. So what is happening on Pentecost? It's the confirmation, the sealing, the gifting of the power from on high for us to go forth into this world to live our lives as the church, as his Christ, and as Adam said, to be the salt of the earth, to be the light of the world, to be who God has called us to be. So it's all then. So on that day, you mean, think about it. Nothing else can happen. What else is there to do, say, or be? He's done it all. It's kind of like the end of the history. And now we're living, actually, as we do believe, as Orthodox, that this is, a revelation. They talk about the 1,000-year reign. Well, we're in that 1,000-year reign. Jesus is not, according to our understanding, Jesus is not going to come again and then reign for another 1,000 years and then finally put Satan in his place. This is the reign of the church. This is the 1,000 years. 1,000 doesn't mean just 1,000. It means a long time. That's what it is. So we're in that time frame now. We're in that new age of the kingdom of heaven, and it will fully be revealed and confirmed to us when he does come in the second coming again. Then it'll be completed fully. But we're still able to celebrate it now. What do we sing in the liturgy? At that beautiful time in the anaphora, heaven and earth are full of thy glory. It's already come together. So you want to know what we believe? Look at what we pray. Any questions about anything? Anybody out there in the e-world?
Hello, anyone? You're good? Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the feast, a blessed feast to you all. As a sort of interesting thing, Adam didn't tell us what he's going to talk about, but I guess we could assume maybe 7 and 8. I don't know if he'll get into 9, but you can look at 7 and 8, I'm sure, for next time. And what next time I am going to talk about is the existence of God. How do we know that he exists? No, 30 minutes, 40 minutes for it. Thank you, everybody. God bless you all.